I just want to say thanks everybody for being here. This is the first workshop we're doing with Think Big, which is the European network Grand Formats just set up, well, not just in 2018. And we look forward to meeting you in real life in August. And I'm going to let Marie, who's a Secretary General from On the Move in Brussels, talk to you about international mobility.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much for the invitation. So my name is Marie, and I work for On the Move, which is a mobility information network. And the idea of this 1.5 hour session is more like to share a little bit more what you can find on the Move website, but also eventually some trends and opportunities that can be also useful for you, depending on where you are also located in Europe. And I would like to say as well, thank you very much for being here, because we know that time is, time has been challenging for quite a couple of months right now, but we are also in this, when we are lucky, I would say we are sometime in this in-between period also with reopening of space, so it's not always easy to be online. I also would like to say that when I will present a little bit about On the Move, and after, of course, I am open to whatever question you may have. And obviously, I can also welcome questions in French, because with my accent, you can really hear that I am French. I will also send after this session to Tiffen a list of web links, because On the Move is a lot about signposting information. So don't worry, I will share some information which are shared on our website, but after you will have the direct link on where to find the information. Before we start, maybe you can, so for those who have the video, or even not the video, because you can also maybe raise the, like the automatic hand, who know On the Move already. So can you raise your hand if you know a little bit On the Move? Okay. Okay. Natural Orchestra, I would say, yes. Of course. But it's good sometimes to be updated, and we have also a new website, so it's also good. So yeah, so it's a kind of mix which is good, and hopefully for those who know a little bit, you will also learn a little bit more about it. So I will share my screen, and it will be easy. So if you have I will make a short presentation, and after I will go into Q&A. But if you have any, if anything is unclear, or if suddenly my sound doesn't work or whatsoever, just raise your hands, or just start to talk in the room. We are not a very big group at the end of the day. So I am sharing the screen. So this is the website of On the Move. So as I just say, we have a new website, which is quite a revolution for On the Move, because we had a very old website, which dated back from 10 years ago. But at the same time, we didn't want to lose one. Even though the design was very, very vintage, but what we didn't want to lose is this question of accessibility and, easiness to access information. Because in a way, the less time you spend on the Move website, the best it is, because we are about signposting information. For a little bit of history, we will celebrate our 20th anniversary in next year, in fact. And we were created by another network that maybe some of you know, which is called IETM, which is the International Network for Contemporary Performing Arts. Again, I will put that in the list. Don't worry about that. And basically, I would say that the very mission of On the Move is still the same as 20 years ago. This means that to make accessible in a regular manner and in a free manner opportunities, funding opportunities related to the mobility of artists and cultural professionals. What has really changed since for the past 20 years is that we don't only focus on the performing arts sector, we can focus on any type of sector, and it really depends on the, on the call that we can identify. And we also focus, focus not only on Europe, but also like on international type of call. So I would say this is the main difference. In 2005, we became a Belgium association. So for those who know Belgium, it's like a ASBL, which is like in a, I would say, the legal framework for association. And since also 2019, we are also a French association. So On the Move is on the move, but depending on where the project is taking place, we have the French association for project taking place in France, because we have also a subsidy from the French Ministry of Culture, and most of our European type of project or type of partnership are going through the Belgium-based association. We are also a network of organizations. I will come back a little bit more about that, but you don't need to be a member of the network to access the information. So this is also an important point. Basically, what can you find on the Move website? You can access more than 2,500 calls, which are either put in our course section or into our mobility funding guides section. For the recent call, so here basically every day we have like some calls which are updated here, where basically which can be a bit reminder, but which are also calls where we are not very sure that they will be that they will happen again, or sometimes it's also call. I will take an example here, which are related to, for instance, to a European project. So European project doesn't only mean that you apply for a Creative Europe project, but sometimes the project is already funded, and there is a call, for instance, like in this Real In project for artists or for residency type of opportunities. So this is really part of a project. This project will last 2 years, so we will only put this call here. And after, it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. You have a little bit information about this call, which is also quite multidisciplinary. You have a little bit of information, what also is covered for this call, and the eligibility criteria. And after, you have the deadline, and if you want more information, you can just click on it. So this one is really quite straightforward. And now we have also, we have also a search engine where you can find the most recent call, and also like depending on the type, project funding, competition, and so on. And also you can search by deadline in order also like to be updated on the different type of funding scheme, for instance, here on residency. Of course, everything is not related to music, but they can be called related to particular area of music, and or as the call that I mentioned, which are more multidisciplinary. I would say that in the call section, more and more we have calls which are more like multidisciplinary, more than very specific on a particular discipline. So this part is the calls funding, and after you have what we call the mobility funding guides, which are guides, so which is basically PDF document where we try as much as possible together with different partner researcher in different countries in the world or world region as well, to identify regular mobility funding scheme, which means a mobility funding scheme. If you take the example of a European country, where mobility can be supported from one country to go internationally and vice versa. So usually these calls are more related to public funders, private funders, depending on the country as well. So if you take, for instance, in France, it would be more also like the calls related to, you know, like the Institut Français or the French Ministry of Culture, for instance. Depending on the country also, you can have also like more regional sources of funding. If you take like Germany, because of course Germany is also divided into regions or lenders, so you can find also like more information. And after you can just go, and as I say, it's more a simple PDF that we try, depending on the context and depending on the funding that we find. Sorry, it's not it's my internet, which is a bit slow. So you can find access to this mobility, this is really slow this morning, mobility funding guide. And after you have like, so you see like different mobility funding scheme. And after I just show it to you like later in the guide, you can just refer to, you know, like the mobility funding organization, and after you have more information here. We try as much as possible to update them every 2 or 3 years. We hope to be able from next year to have a massive revamping of most of the guides. For those who are based in France, the advantage of the French mobility funding guide is the only guide which is updated every year. Thanks to the support of the Ministry of Culture. And after you have different also like mobility funding guides, which are related to different world region. Of course, here I will not hide the fact, anyway, it's very obvious that there are huge discrepancies between countries. I mean, I will just stop for the moment to share my screen. If you take the example of Europe, for instance, I will talk about it a bit later. Maybe you heard about a new mobility funding scheme at the European level, which is called Hypotenuse, which is supported by the Creative Europe program. And 2 years ago we did, so it was before the pandemic, we did yeah, because there is a before and an after, I guess. We did a huge research about the mobility funding scheme that do exist or sometimes do not exist in Creative Europe country. And yeah, basically out of the 2,500 funding scheme, we could identify regular one. More than 50% are basically in the hands of a couple of countries, including France, Germany, Finland, and so on. So there are huge discrepancies of access to opportunities, which are even more exacerbated right now with the pandemic. And of course, when you go, for instance, on the mobility funding guides for Africa or for the MENA region, which is one of our latest mobility funding guide supported by the Institut Français, so the MENA region in the Middle East, North African country, usually or very often the support is more coming from European organization or private funding bodies, but rarely at a national level. So I guess when we work internationally, this is also something that, yeah, very unfortunately, like which is a situation that we need to face. So as you can see with the website of On the Move, so you have this 2 entry point for information and I would say update on mobility opportunities, so the news and the mobility funding guide. And in order to also access, I mean, or to have like, you know, a regular update, you can also register to a free newsletter and you can choose according to your language. I mean, at least we have 5 languages available, so which is also a good way to keep updated of the course, because the problem is that very often the course, I mean, particularly the course which are in the course section and not in the regular mobility funding scheme, very often they come also with a tight deadline. So it's always good also like to be updated about that. One thing I forgot to mention, and which is very important, is that really, with more than ever, I would say, we focus on mobility funding opportunities where costs are covered for selected artists, cultural organization, cultural professional, depending on the opportunities, I would say. For instance, we won't put any type of participation in festival or residency. We really focus on the one which are really, at least partially covered, but we try as much as possible fully covered. This point has also its importance with the COVID context, which is basically our context, I would say, right now. Because there are more opportunities with, let's say, online residency or festival online as well. So here again, we only focus on opportunities, even if it is like a small fee remuneration, but where these opportunities are paid. Because as you know, unfortunately, there are many, fortunately, there are many opportunities online, but unfortunately, many of these opportunities are not paid, or copyright of artists are not fully covered or respected. Before I move maybe to first question and after to another part of what I wanted to share with you, I also would like very much to come back also on the one how to say, section of our website which can be also important for you. So as I mentioned, we are a network, but you don't need to be a member to access information. Our members are more organizations that either are founders of mobility, so you can have like the Arts Council of England, which is quite a huge organization, but also an independent mobility funding scheme like the Art Move Africa, for instance. We have also networks. We have also organizations which work on the question of enforced mobility, so the question of mobility of artists or cultural professionals who are forced to leave their country for political, economic reasons. And last but not least, we have also what we call mobility info point. And this mobility info point can be particularly important for you if you don't know them yet. Mobility info point are organizations mostly in Europe, but we have also one member in the US, which is called Tami's Dad, which provide for free information about all the things that we love about mobility related to administrative issues, social protection, taxation issue, visa issue, of course. I mean, the question of visa, I mean, in many countries in Europe, we are very lucky to have our passport, but the question of visa is even more complex complexified with the COVID situation and the health condition as well. So this organization can also provide you information in different countries. So we don't have yet all countries covered. This is also something that we are advocating for. But this organization can be interesting meeting point, contact point for you to address when you have particular question, like let's say in France, if you invite artists from other countries in Europe or internationally, if you have particular question of work contract, or let's say in Germany as well, Netherlands. What is interesting as well is that we have former and new, I would say, info point in the UK. Former meaning that Wealth Art International has been always an active member of this group of mobility info points, but with the Brexit, because there is the pandemic, but there is also the Brexit, they set up as well what is called the Arts Info Point UK, and maybe also you took part in some of their recent webinar that they did on the question of, so we have many post-Brexit webinar, which are organized particularly in partnership with the Info Arts UK. So I am Arts Info Point UK, sorry. So I am particularly mentioning this mobility info point because I know particularly in the music sector, in the performing arts sector, there are many questions which are raised. I don't know whether also some of you know of the organization which is called Pearl, which is the network of employers in the music and the performing arts sector. They have also like very interesting guide and toolkit. If you are interested, I could also add them in the list of resources that I will send to you on copyright issue, on also traveling with instruments. I saw also that they did like some translation of this guide. And these are, yeah, as you know, if you work in this field, particularly important information to be aware of. So the guide may not address all your questions, and sometimes it's also good that the mobility info point behind them, there are people that eventually can address directly the question that you may have. Knowing that one of the observations made by the mobility info point for quite some years already is that, I mean, the sector is, of course, I would say, in many extent professionalizing itself, but the questions are becoming more and more complex because also you can have a touring of a group or a company and, you know, with artists coming from different countries or depending from a different legal system, depending also on the status of their employment or whether they're freelance and so on, which very much complexify their sometimes the contract or the question related to taxation issue, for instance. So this is more the first part of the information I wanted to share, more like this practical aspects, so the course, the guides, and also the mobility info point that can be also a useful organization for you. So once again, also for people who arrive a bit later, I will produce a list of links, so you don't have to worry. You will also find back all this at least information that you can delve into after the presentation or later in the year. I don't know whether there is a question or maybe somebody is yeah, somebody or something is not clear with what I presented, or comment. So Ophélie say it's clear for me, thank you. Ça va? Okay. So I continue. I have to the impression. I know that you are here, so but to talk a little bit a lot. I mean to talk a lot. Another point maybe I wanted to highlight as well. It's more in terms of trends. I mean, what we can observe as well in terms of trends and opportunities related to mobility. First, what I would like to say is that despite the context, the website of On the Move, and it's also the, I would say, networks and websites in Europe and internationally has never been closed, I would say. There was never a moment that we say we don't have any more opportunities to share. So what is interesting is also like since the beginning of the pandemic, how some founders and some organizations have been either delaying their course or their opportunities, but also sometimes creating new form of opportunities, of course, very often with an online component. So it's, and I would say that what we notice as well is that more than ever, so I say at the beginning On the Move as a website has been existing for almost 20 years, but the website has never been so visited than last year. So which means as well that, I mean, I don't think we needed a proof of that, or not such a radical way to have this proof, but that for many artists and cultural professionals as well, the fact of being in mobility or the fact of developing international collaboration is part of their main source of income. And that very often, as I mentioned at the beginning already, opportunities are very scarce as far as international opportunities are concerned. But of course, but often as well at the national level for national support, there is also very limited opportunity. So the international basically is the only way to create, to tour, to train, and so on. So we could really see that, because we could really see that some of the feature of On The Move website has never been so visited since last year. After, in terms of trends, and I guess for those of you who are also into European cooperation and also with the network or the project Think Big, of course there are like different type of thematic or topic-based type of approach, which are more and more which are more and more visible through the course and opportunities. When I started my presentation, I say that it's more rare now when we signpost, particularly in the course, in the one-off type of course, when we signpost opportunities which are only focusing, let's say, on dance or music. So they are more like cross-disciplinary type of opportunities. And I would say there are more and more, and even more now, opportunities which are cross-sectorial. So related to opportunities to work in the music sector, for instance, but with, of course, a connection with the environmental challenge as well, or the question of social engagement, inclusion, accessibility issues. So I am putting some of the projects also that we are working at the moment on the question of accessibility of artists with disability and audience with disability, part of a project which is called Europe Beyond Access, which is coordinated by the British Council, or this Shifts project, which is a project at a European level that link, in fact, 8 European network, and you have the list here, and I will send also to you the link to this project. Climate change, gender equality, inclusion of minorities. So all these questions, we find them very often, of course, in calls and in opportunities. And of course, for those of you who are also looking in particular at the program of Creative Europe at the moment, you may have seen as well as these questions are very transversal and very crucial for whoever is developing a cooperation project or is applying, for instance, as a network. So this is also, I would say that these were already trends. I mean, in a way, I'm always careful also when I need to nuance that, but in a way, all these issues, climate change, inclusion, accessibility, are not new. But let's say that with the current pandemic, this question have been even more exacerbated, and we can see that for some funding body, be them at European, international, sometimes also national and local level, they are also like very much, they are, how to say, even more highlighted, I would say. So this is also for you something to have in mind. Usually also the feedback that we get, and I fully understand it, it's more like, and this is something also, because what I am sharing now, it's more information, but we do also a lot of work in terms of advocacy, and that people sometimes feel a bit, or often feel a bit pushed to fit with the, you know, what is asked for them, you know, like to tick the box on these different subjects. And that often the opportunities which are offered are not really much matching the needs of the sector. So this is also something that we advocate. I am not saying that we should not address this issue, but this issue should be also addressed with regard of the context in which different artists, cultural professional organization, ensemble, collective are also based in. And the issue on environmental challenge cannot be somehow embedded the same way depending on where you are located in Europe or even more internationally. So this leads me to a point I wanted also to make is that there are more and more, there is an increase, we feel that there is also an increased need for a kind of call for mobility, solidarity, and justice. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, for many artists and cultural professionals, to be international in a way is the only way to survive. Or mobility is for many artists and cultural professionals a way to stay home, meaning that you go internationally, you take part in a festival, you earn money in a currency which is higher than in your own country, and after you reinvest this funding in your own local context. So there is a big part of the ecosystem which is now very much, which was already very fragile, and which is even more, I don't know whether you say that in English, fragilized, or which is even more fragile right now. So when we do have some meeting already at a European level, but we have also a series of meetings related to the African continent, for instance, there is more and more this call for mobility, justice, and solidarity in a context where, of course, resources are even more scarce, but of course, the most vulnerable professional and artists who were already in a condition of vulnerability are even more affected with the context. So this is also something that not only we observe, but we try to be part in, and try also as much as possible to advocate for also at the European national level. Because I am talking a lot, so I wanted to know whether you have any question, whether it creates some form of reaction or observation, or yeah, any question you may have. Oh, it's clear. Or maybe some. You can also put them by chat if you want. Okay, so there is no question. So I mentioned, so for people who arrive, thank you for Audrey. For people who arrive a bit later, so I started more to share about news and opportunities that we are sharing on the Move website, where of course music can be one of the entry points. And also the mobility funding guide. So as I mentioned, I will send the links towards this publication, and towards this resource that you can further use or download, eventually not print. Everything is available online, so even if you print a guide, it's related to different topics, so it doesn't really help, I would say. I mentioned as well the transversal issue and topic that we see more and more in calls, be it at European, national level, on questions related, of course, on environmental challenge, on inclusion, accessibility. They are not new subjects, but indeed they are even more exacerbated with the current pandemic. And also like this question that we see more and more, and that we try also to advocate for on the call for mobility, justice, and solidarity. So that at the end of, if we are talking about the world of tomorrow, that we are more in a fairer system despite this discrepancies of access to opportunities. Maybe a point that I wanted also to mention, to particularly in the context of Think Big and Grand Format, it's also like some new form of opportunities at the European level, which can be also interesting for you. Even, I mean, of course, I understand that there are different sizes also of collective, ensemble, and so on, but I mean, it doesn't come out of the blue. It's also after years of advocacy of different networks, not only on the move, but many networks, that some opportunities seems to be a bit more accessible to smaller or middle size, I would say, operator or organization. And sorry for if eventually you know about it, but for those who don't know, I think it's important to remind it, because even though we are quite advanced in the year now, but there will be another call that I wanted to highlight. Don't find it on it. Just a moment. Should work now. Yes. So I mentioned it a little bit before. It's Hypotenuse. Hypotenuse, it's a pilot program under the Creative Europe program, which basically is a form of answer to address the question of inequalities of access to mobility opportunities. As some of you may remember, I said at the beginning that of this talk that if we only take the European level, so at the level of the Creative Europe countries, so the 41 Creative Europe country, basically the mobility funding scheme, when they do exist, they are more in the hand of a couple of countries. And the idea of what has become Hypotenuse is more to also address these inequalities of access, knowing that usually also like how to say, projects at the European level are more like to add value or to address issues that cannot be solved or are not yet tackled at a national or cross-border or bilateral level, let's say. So some of you may be aware, maybe some of you applied, by the way, at the first wave, I would say, of calls related to Hypotenuse. So this year, what is interesting is that, so first of all, what is interesting is that this mobility funding scheme has not been put on a hold, that they are still, they were delayed, but they are still tested. And this year, what is interesting is that there are two waves of calls, because there are two consortia. One first consortium is coordinated by the Goethe Institute with Institut Français and Isolation, and they had calls to support the mobility of artists, including in the music field, but also in the literature and also architecture field, where individuals directly could apply for funding, for different forms of mobility, be it for residency, participation, events, and so on. This one is was the one for individual. Now you have also a second experimentation, which is more related to what is called the Hypotenuse House. So it's more organization, which can be also ensemble or organization within the building, a residency place, for instance, that can invite, and the invitation can go till May 2022, 2 to 5 artists or cultural operators for a particular project. So they had, you can see after in the call for application, so the next call for application, and this will be the second call of the year, they had already a first one, will be on the 23rd of August, and the deadline will be on the 3rd of October. This is open to all disciplines, of course, including music. And it's quite interesting. This is more a mobility type of support. So this is not a cooperation project and so on. but it can be quite interesting for incoming mobility to invite artists. They have different strands, so it can be a mobility to create, it can be a mobility to connect, it can be a mobility to train, depending on the format that you follow. So if you are interested to invite, there is also a part, most of the mobility shall be, I mean, hopefully the context will continue to improve, shall be on site, physical, but there are also like some part of the funding which can be also allocated to virtual form of mobility. So I am mentioning that because all the calls are over for this year, for this pilot year, but this particular course, this particular scheme is still open. So it may be also interesting to have a look at it. Eventually you have a project where really you are looking more for mobility support. This is not like co-production cost, but it is really to invite people. So this could be quite interesting to look at it. And once again, music is open. Another point that I wanted to highlight, but maybe, this is quite new, so I thought it could be also interesting. And I see that, for instance, in France, Centre National de la Musique, CNM, is doing, I think it was yesterday, in fact, that they did a workshop on Creative Europe project. What is interesting is that for the cooperation project for Creative Europe, even though we don't do directly all this information, but I think within the scope of this information session, it can be interesting. There are also calls which are more related to, before you needed, let's say, 50% of matching fund or 40% of matching fund when you were engaging in the cooperation project. And now there is a new funding line for smaller type of cooperation project where the matching fund is 20% and the European Commission funding is up to 80%. So there are other type of opportunities that can be also interesting for association or organization which have not yet been involved in a European project. And I thought it would be also quite interesting to have a look at it, because I don't know your experience in a European project, but I usually the fear is that it's too complicated, it's too administrative, it's too bureaucratic, which in many ways is, but at the same time, depending how how you can be accompanied, how you can be mentored on it, how you can get information, have maybe already partnership into place. There are interesting opportunities that can be more reachable for a larger group of organization and people. And I am saying that really by knowing it. I mean, On the Move is also a small organization, twofold association in a way, but we are still a small association. And for your information, by the way, we are not network funded under the Creative Europe program. We can be partners of European projects, but we are not funded directly by the network funding scheme. Again, I spoke a lot. I don't know whether it echoes anything, whether you heard already about, let's say, Hypotenuse. Maybe some of you have applied for it, I don't know, or what I mentioned about the Creative Europe project. Usually I don't mention it because there are other organizations who do it, like Creative Europe Desk in different countries in Europe, Relais Culture Europe in France. But I thought that it would be quite interesting because this is the first time that let's say smaller type of project, but interesting one can be also proposed. And so many networks, including On the Move, have been advocating for that for a long time, because otherwise it's interesting when you are a bigger organization, but a lot of interesting projects happen also in a more alternative venue and smaller venue, smaller organization, and they are also interesting to have this, relevant to have this European support. So I don't know whether you have question, or maybe a remark based on your experience as well. No experience yet of European project or applying for Hypotenuse, for instance? No, not yet. So I don't know, maybe Tiffen, we can also, I mean, I hope that eventually this conversation can be also the start of other conversation, but I see as well that more, particularly in the field of music, that more organization, I mean, like you have SEN in France, but also like there is a network of export music organization, IMI, that I will put also the link in the list of resources, and sometimes also they can be a contact point to you know, advise better the sector on these opportunities. Yeah, I think I gave I spoke a lot during more like or not, yeah, 50 minutes. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what else really to add on. If there is other type of information that you. What I can also, I mean, I can take any question, comment. What I can say as well is. Because we are a small group here, is that usually, particularly if it is almost the first time that you hear about on the move, you know, there is also a lot of information to delve in. So maybe if you have any question, I will also leave my email in the list of resources. And if there is, of course, it's not to write application or something like that, but you know, if something was unclear after you went, or you need the contact of another organization, I mean, please do not hesitate also like to let me know. But of course, maybe I don't have the answer, but at least we can have this conversation. Or if I don't have directly the answer, I can ask to some members or some people that we know as well. Yeah. I see a comment. So I remember that you advise. But it's a mixed question for from Surnatural Orchestra. It's Marie-Edith, yeah. So you say in the chat, I remember that you advise, yeah, because so for the little story as well, On the Move is providing information resource, but also in some countries, like in France, we have some mentoring program or programme d'accompagnement en français. And this one is, so Surnatural Orchestra took part in one of these programs supported by the Ministry of Culture and Institut Français, so that's why we know each other already, with Surnatural Orchestra. And also, I think I saw somebody from another ensemble that I know, like Ensemble Sébarré, if I am not mistaken in the list here. So you say you advise a lot of the cooperation way of building mobility for a large ensemble. Do you think we could build that kind of program inside our Think Big? I have to say, maybe we need another conversation with Tiffen and Think Big also to understand better how the Think Big project is functioning. But what I can just add is that for us, when we think in terms of mobility and when we think in terms of project and mentoring or accompagnement, there is really this idea of also taking this question of international of mobility in a very holistic and 360 way. So not only to go somewhere, so this question of mobility as more like the export or diffusion or dissemination of work, but seeing as well the question of mobility as a way to build one's capacity to develop projects, so more like on the training part. For instance, we are very interested as well on this, particularly within a network like that, of this staff exchange. So to our shadowing process, to go also in another country, in another ensemble or in another collective, for instance, to see how on a particular issue, be it administrative, communication, artistic practice, how also we can be also inspired and learn from one another. So it can be at this particular level, more building capacity. It can be also, of course, to tour and export as well. It can be also like sharing good practices on all these transversal issues I mentioned as well in the question of accessibility, for instance, accessibility of audience towards some artwork, how it works in different countries, the kind of policies which are in place, the kind of methodology which are in place. So this is really where this, how to think in terms of cooperation, to learn, not only to share, but also to learn other way and eventually to recontextualize that in another, in one's own context. So yeah, so again, I don't have enough clue of the project, but there are different ways to consider both the issue of mobility and the question of cooperation, and different formats also to consider within a project to learn from one another, but also to share and also to do together. Yeah.
What we thought, because I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the starting point of any European project has to be an artistic encounter or meeting or idea or whatever. So what we're doing in November, we're having this big time together in Clermont-Ferrand, which is called La Rentrée Grand Format. What we're going to do, since we're inviting French and European members, we're going to set up, we call them slow meetings, just so that you get the idea that you've got time to talk and to exchange and talk about music. And what we're going to try and do is, well, create little sort of I don't know, sort of connections between members who write music in the same way or who are interested in the same type of artistic streams. And well, we thought it was a good starting point, since we're not going to develop any European projects for any of our members because we don't have the capacity to do it. We thought if the members sort of try and start and exchange together, then that might be the starting point of something big.
Yeah, indeed. And it reminds me of publication which was made a few years ago, also to talk about this question of networking, collaboration, and so on. And that was entitled it starts with a conversation. So this conversation can be artistically based, it can be based on a topic, it can be based on a meeting of very different people. So, but it starts often with a conversation. And this is really, I mean, even though we can have a conversation within Zoom meetings, but this is also something that we really miss, because there is also this question of we can be a facilitator of conversation, but sometimes also conversation, or very often they happen sometimes in a not planned way as well. So yes, definitely. So this is how to stimulate conversation, and the entry point can be indeed artistic or other way. And the fact that you say as well that you will be in Clermont-Ferrand make me think of another type of opportunities as well that we see more and more, and which can be also interesting for the group here, because Clermont-Ferrand is, if I am not mistaken, is also one of the cities in France which is candidate for the European Capital of Culture title. I think it's 2028, together with Rouen or other city. So if I am not mistaken, but anyway, it's also a good connection to say that as you may know, the system of European Capital of Culture. So every year there are 2 or 3 European Capital of Culture. So some of them have been delayed. 2 days ago, I was in Avignon, and there were representatives from Elefsis in Greece, which was supposed to be this year, but which will be in 2023. Or Vespem also in Hungary, and I think it will be also Novi Sad in Serbia. But beyond saying that, compare with a few years ago, more and more this European Capital of Culture have also calls. I mean, Elefsis had 2 or 3 calls since the beginning of the year, either to select artists or groups for residency or for project or for participation, also in project in public space. We see also of, we had already seen that before the pandemic, but I would say now also with the pandemic, also more opportunities are provided for artistic projects in public space and participatory one. So usually when we have them, we put them in the news section I introduced to you, but this is also an interesting way to be connected to a different context, but in a kind of European type of setting. So I don't know whether you chose Clermont-Ferrand also for that, but it just made me think, yeah.
We've got a great partner there called Gazra. That's why.
Okay. But it may be interesting to have somebody from the city, from the, if you want, I have one contact of the Capital of Culture. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Okay, is there any question, comment? Okay, a last point maybe. So once again, I will send the list, put my email. So if there is question after that, something wasn't clear, or don't hesitate. The question also of European Capital of Culture and Opportunities make me think as well of maybe a last point, which can be also interesting at the European level, is that sometimes there are like dedicated funding beyond labelization, because labelization rarely come with funding, but sometimes you have funding related to presidency of the European Union. And so right now it's Slovenia with the presidency of the European Union. France will have the presidency of the European Union for the first semester of 2022. Right now it's, no, just before it was Portugal. So it could be, it's sometimes also there are calls which are related to that, or events. You know, the French presidencies, for instance, they are planning a meeting related to artistic practice and environmental sustainability in June next year. So it's also sometimes interesting to see or to participate in some European meetings which are related, which are also taking place in your own country, because your country has, for instance, the presidency of the European Union. So it's not only, of course, this big political thing, but you have also like some, you know, meetings or special focus, which can be also interesting. Okay. So if we plan until 11, but if you don't have any question, and I know that time is not time is money, but if you, but as I mentioned, I mean, when I say time is money, people are nodding. So as I mentioned, I will send the list, and if you have any question that don't come immediately but later, even if it is, let's say, in 3 months or toward the end of the year, just remind me that you were part of this meeting, and after also I will make the connection with Stephen so that it can, you know, that we can also keep in touch on kind of question that would have emerged from this first meeting. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. So thank you, and so we stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.